Marcus Webb had never been particularly graceful, a fact that his instructors at the Orbital Mechanics Academy had noted with disappointing regularity. Still, he'd managed to land a decent position as a maintenance technician aboard the Neptune Garden Station, a sprawling orbital greenhouse that supplied fresh produce to the outer colonies. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept him among the stars, and more importantly, it kept him employed. The station hummed with life, both plant and sentient, as Marcus navigated the curved corridors toward Section 7, where the exotic xenobotanical specimens were housed. His toolkit clanked against his hip with each step, the familiar weight a comfort after 3 years working these halls. Finally came a melodic voice as he entered the humid warmth of the tropical wing. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten." Zephyra straightened from where she'd been examining a peculiar purple vine, her silver skin catching the artificial sunlight in a way that made Marcus's breath hitch, as it had every single time he'd seen her over the past 6 months. She was Valerian, a species known for their botanical expertise and their striking appearance skin that shimmered like liquid mercury, hair the color of deep space, and eyes that glowed a soft emerald green. "Sorry," Marcus said, adjusting his toolkit to cover his momentary distraction. The atmospheric recycler in Section 3 decided to have a breakdown during lunch. Zephyra's lips curved into a smile that made something warm bloom in Marcus's chest. Always the hero, rushing from crisis to crisis. She gestured toward a complex piece of equipment mounted on the wall between 2 massive planters. "This growth accelerator has been malfunctioning for days. It keeps surging and nearly fried an entire bed of Andromedan orchids yesterday." Marcus approached the device, pulling out his diagnostic scanner. The accelerator was Valerian tech elegant, organic looking, and completely unlike the clunky human machinery he was used to. "Did you try recalibrating the bioresonance frequency?" 3 times, Zephyra said, moving to stand beside him. She smelled like rain and something sweetly floral that he couldn't quite identify. "The frequency holds for about an hour, then spikes again." As Marcus opened the access panel, he became acutely aware of how close they were standing. In the 6 months since Zephyra had arrived at the station, they'd worked together dozens of times. Each interaction left him wanting more time, more conversation, more of whatever indefinable things sparked between them when their eyes met. "Could be a feedback loop in the primary circuit," he murmured, trying to focus on the tangle of bioconduits instead of the way Zephyra's hair brushed his shoulder. "Hand me the molecular wrench." She reached for his toolkit at the same moment he turned to grab it himself. Their hands collided, her fingers sliding over his, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through his entire nervous system. The wrench clattered to the floor. "Sorry," they said simultaneously, both bending to retrieve it. Their heads nearly collided. Marcus found himself frozen, inches from Zephyra's face, close enough to see the intricate patterns of silver that swirled across her skin like living art. Her emerald eyes widened slightly, and for a breathless moment, neither of them moved. "I'll just ... Marcus cleared his throat and picked up the wrench, trying to ignore the way his heart was hammering. Zephyra straightened quickly, a faint lavender tint coloring her cheeks, the Valerian equivalent of a blush. "Yes, right, the accelerator." Marcus forced himself to concentrate on the device, using the molecular wrench to adjust the bioconduits. "The problem is definitely in the resonance chamber. See this buildup? The organic components aren't cycling properly. Can you fix it?" Zephyra leaned in to look, her shoulder pressing against his arm. "Should be simple enough," Marcus said, though his hands were suddenly less steady than usual. "I just need to flush the system and recalibrate the..." His elbow bumped against a smooth crystalline button he hadn't noticed before. The accelerator hummed to life with a sound like singing crystal. A beam of soft golden light erupted from the device, engulfing Zephyra before either of them could react. Marcus. Zephyra gasped, stumbling backward. I didn't mean to. Marcus's words died in his throat as he watched. Horrified and mesmerized in equal measure, Zephyr's eyes were wide with shock as she looked down at herself. The modest botanical survey uniform she wore was suddenly straining at the seams. Her chest was expanding, swelling beneath the fabric with each passing second, growing to proportions that would have been impressive on any species, and were absolutely extraordinary on her slender Valerian frame. The transformation stopped after perhaps 10 seconds, leaving Zephyra standing motionless, her hands hovering uncertainly over her dramatically enhanced curves. The lavender blush on her cheeks had deepened to a rich purple that spread down her neck. Oh no, Marcus breathed. Oh no, no, no. What ... Zephyra's voice came out higher than normal. What did you do? I don't know. I just bumped something and Marcus frantically examined the device, searching for a reverse function. An off switch, anything. There has to be a way to undo this. Zephyra tugged at her uniform, trying unsuccessfully to adjust it over her new proportions. The fabric stretched taut, the closures straining visibly. This is not happening. I have a presentation to the station council in 4 hours. I'm supposed to discuss funding for the new hydroponic expansion. I'll fix it, Marcus promised, though panic was beginning to set in. I swear, I'll figure this out. She looked up at him, and despite the mortification clear on her face, something else flickered in her emerald eyes. Was that amusement? You certainly have a talent for making memorable impressions, Marcus Webb. He couldn't help but laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. This is not how I want to be memorable. How did you want to be memorable? The question came out softer than expected, and suddenly the air between them felt charged with more than just the aftermath of the accident. Marcus met her gaze, seeing his own confused feelings reflected back at him. That's not important right now. What's important is fixing this. Zephyra nodded, though she didn't break eye contact. Agreed. Though I should mention that Valerian physiology doesn't respond well to sudden alterations. I'm feeling rather ... lightheaded. Here, sit down. Marcus quickly pulled over a work stool, steadying her as she sat. The movement caused everything to bounce in a way that made both of them look away quickly. Fresh waves of embarrassment washing over them. This is mortifying, Zephyra muttered, crossing her arms over her chest, or attempting to. The gesture was now physically impossible. She dropped her arms with a frustrated sound. How am I supposed to walk through the station like this? Everyone will stare. Marcus pulled off his work jacket without thinking. Here, it's big on me, so it should ... help. Zephyra looked at the offered jacket, then up at him, something shifting in her expression. In Valerian culture, he suddenly remembered reading, wearing someone's clothing was considered an intimate gesture. Too late to take it back now. She took the jacket slowly, her fingers brushing his as she did. Thank you, she said quietly, slipping it on. The heavy fabric did help conceal things somewhat, though it couldn't completely hide the dramatic changes. Right, Marcus said, trying to refocus. The accelerator. Let's figure out exactly what it did so we can reverse it. He turned back to the device, but his mind was racing with more than just technical concerns. The brief touches, the way she'd looked at him, the fact that she was now wearing his jacket, it all swirled together with 6 months of suppressed attraction into a confusing, intoxicating mixture. Marcus? Zephyra's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Yeah? For what it's worth ... She paused, that lavender blush still coloring her cheeks. This isn't the worst thing that could have happened. He turned to look at her, confused. How is this not the worst thing? A small smile played at her lips. Well, it finally gave you a reason to spend an extended amount of time alone with me. I was starting to think you'd never work up the courage to ask. Marcus felt heat rush to his face. I what? You think I haven't noticed the way you look at me? Zephyra asked, her emerald eyes sparkling with something that might have been mischief. Or the way you always volunteer to help with my projects. Or how you time your lunch breaks to coincide with mine. I wasn't trying to be obvious, Marcus admitted, running a hand through his hair. You weren't, she assured him. To anyone but me. Valerians are quite perceptive about matters of attraction. And? Marcus asked, his heart suddenly pounding for entirely different reasons than panic. Zephyra stood, moving closer to him despite her awkward new proportions. And I've been equally obvious by Valerian standards. Though I suspect human courtship rituals are rather different from ours. Courtship? The word came out strangled. Is that not the appropriate term? She tilted her head, genuinely curious despite the bizarre circumstances. No, it is. I just ... Marcus took a breath. I didn't think you'd be interested. In me? In a human? Why not? Zephyra reached out, her silver fingers touching his arm lightly. Where she touched, his skin tingled with warmth. You're kind, intelligent, dedicated to your work. You make me laugh. And you're not unattractive by any species standards. Marcus looked down at where her hand rested on his arm, then back up at her glowing emerald eyes. This is happening. We're having this conversation while I've accidentally enlarged your ... coconuts? Zephyra supplied with a completely straight face. He blinked. What? It's a human fruit, isn't it? I've been studying your cultural references. She was definitely trying not to smile now. Despite everything, Marcus laughed, a real laugh that released some of the tension coiled in his chest. That's not exactly how we'd phrase it, but points for effort. Language barriers aside, Zephyra said, her smile growing. Perhaps we should focus on solving the immediate problem before exploring these other ... developments. Right, yes, the accelerator. Marcus turned back to the device, but he was grinning now. His panic transformed into something lighter, brighter. Though, for the record, I think exploring those developments sounds really good. For the record, Zephyra replied, moving to stand beside him again. So do I now. Let's see if we can figure out this technology before I have to face the station council, looking like an advertisement for human fantasies about alien physiology, Marcus snorted, pulling up the device's diagnostic interface. When we fix this, and we will fix this, I'm taking you to dinner. A proper dinner, not just coincidental lunch breaks. I'll hold you to that, Zephyra said warmly. Then, looking at the display, oh dear, Marcus? According to this, the accelerator doesn't have a simple reversal function. What? It's designed for permanent botanical modifications. We may need to get creative about solving this. Marcus met her eyes, seeing both concern and unexpected excitement there. How creative are we talking? Very, Zephyra said. This could take all night. Then I guess we'd better get comfortable, Marcus replied. And neither of them mentioned that spending all night together was exactly what they'd both been wanting. Even if the circumstances were completely absurd. The station's chronometer read 23:47 when Marcus finally leaned back from the diagnostic console, rubbing his tired eyes. They'd been at this for hours, combing through Valerian biotechnical databases and cross-referencing with human medical knowledge, trying to understand exactly what the accelerator had done to Zephyra's cellular structure. This is impossible, he muttered, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Every time I think I understand the biomatrix, it does something completely unexpected. Zephyra shifted in her seat beside him, wincing slightly as the movement reminded her of her altered state. She'd kept his jacket on, and somehow that simple fact made Marcus's heart do complicated things every time he noticed it. Valerian biotechnology isn't designed with linear human logic, she said, her melodic voice tinged with fatigue. It's based on organic growth patterns. Everything interconnects, and responds to environmental factors. Marcus turned to look at her properly for the first time in an hour. The artificial lights had dimmed to their night cycle, casting everything in a soft blue glow that made Zephyr's silver skin seem to shimmer even more than usual. She looked exhausted, beautiful, and still somehow managing to maintain her dignity despite the absurdity of the situation. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Physically, I mean." "Strange," Zephyr admitted. "The weight is ... different, and my back aches." She paused, that lavender blush returning to her cheeks. "This is not a conversation I ever imagined having with you. Trust me. This isn't how I imagined our first real conversation going either." Marcus stood, stretching muscles that had gone stiff from sitting. "We should take a break. Maybe some fresh perspective will help." Zephyr nodded, standing carefully. "There's an observation deck in Section 9 that should be empty this time of night. We could see Neptune from there. Lead the way." They walked through the quiet corridors of the station, their footsteps echoing softly. Most of the crew had retired hours ago, leaving the greenhouse levels peaceful and dim. The plants around them seemed to breathe in the low light, creating an atmosphere that felt oddly intimate. "I should tell you something," Zephyr said as they walked. "About Valerian physiology." Marcus glanced at her. "What about it?" "Our bodies respond to emotional states more directly than human bodies do. When we experience strong emotions, particularly attraction, there are visible changes." She gestured to her skin. "You may have noticed the color shifts in my cheeks." "The purple blush thing?" "Yeah, I noticed. That's one manifestation." Zephyr hesitated, then continued. "There are others. Our skin can become bioluminescent when we're experiencing intense romantic feelings, and our body temperature rises significantly when we're near someone we're attracted to." Marcus absorbed this information, his pulse quickening. "Are you telling me this because ... Because you should understand what you're seeing," Zephyr said quietly. "So there's no confusion about what my body is communicating." They reached the observation deck, and Marcus's question died on his lips as he took in the view. The transparent dome gave them a panoramic vista of space, with Neptune's swirling blue storms dominating the view. The planet's aurora danced across its atmosphere in ribbons of ethereal light. "It's beautiful," Marcus breathed. "Yes," Zephyr agreed. But when he looked at her, she was watching him rather than the planet. Their eyes met and held. In the dim light from Neptune's glow, Marcus could see faint patterns of luminescence beginning to trace across Zephyr's silver skin, delicate lines that followed the curves of her face and neck, pulsing softly like captured starlight. "Zephyr," he said softly, "your skin is glowing." She looked down at her hands, watching the bioluminescent patterns ripple across them. "I know. Is it because ... Because I'm standing here alone with you in the dark, and all I can think about is how much I want you to kiss me." Zephyr's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes?" Marcus felt his breath catch. "I thought we were supposed to be solving the accelerator problem." "We are," she said, moving closer to him. The glow from her skin intensified, casting soft silver light between them. "But I think we should acknowledge what's happening here. What's been happening for months. And what's that?" Marcus asked, though he knew the answer. He just wanted to hear her say it. Attraction. Connection. Zephyr reached up, her glowing fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch was warmer than it had been hours ago. The kind that doesn't happen often, regardless of species. Marcus captured her hand in his, marveling at how her bioluminescence seemed to respond to his touch, brightening where their skin met. In human culture, there's usually a period of dating first, getting to know each other. And in Valerian culture, we're more direct about our desires. Her emerald eyes searched his face. "But I'm willing to move at whatever pace makes you comfortable. What if I don't want to move slowly?" The words came out before Marcus could second-guess them. Zephyr's smile was radiant. "Then we're in agreement." He kissed her then, one hand cupping her face while the other wrapped around her waist, careful of her altered proportions. Her lips were soft and warm, and the moment they connected, her bioluminescence flared brightly. Bathing them both in silver light, Zephyra made a soft sound against his mouth and pressed closer, her arms winding around his neck. The kiss deepened, and Marcus felt that same electric sensation from earlier, magnified 100 times a warmth that seemed to pour directly into his nervous system, making every nerve ending sing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Marcus could feel his heart pounding against his ribs. Zephyra's entire body was glowing now, the patterns across her skin complex and beautiful, pulsing in rhythm with what he realized was her heartbeat. "That was ... double quotes," he started. "Significant," Zephyra finished. "Marcus, I should explain something about Valerian bonding." "Bonding?" He kept his arms around her, unwilling to let go. "When we form romantic attachments, there are physiological markers. The bioluminescence is one. But there's something else." She placed her hand over his heart, then guided his hand to rest over hers. "Can you feel that?" Marcus concentrated. Beneath his palm, he could feel Zephyra's heartbeat, and somehow, impossibly, he could feel his own heart beginning to synchronize with hers. "What is this?" "Cardiac resonance," Zephyra explained softly. "It's how Valerians identify compatible mates. When our hearts begin to synchronize, it means our bodies recognize a potential life partner." "Life partner?" Marcus's eyes widened. That's serious." "It is," she agreed. "But it doesn't mean we have to rush anything. It simply means the potential is there. The choice is still ours." Marcus looked down at where their hands rested over each other's hearts, feeling the steady synchronization strengthening. "I want you to know, this isn't just because of the situation we're in. I've felt this way for months." "I know," Zephyra said, her glow softening to a warm shimmer. "So have I every time you'd smile at me across the cafeteria, or stay late to help me with a project, or bring me samples of earth plants you thought I'd find interesting. You noticed all that?" "Marcus, I noticed everything." She laughed softly. "Why do you think I kept requesting maintenance calls for problems I could have fixed myself?" He blinked in surprise. "The accelerator malfunction was completely real," she assured him quickly. "But the irrigation system issues last month, the atmospheric imbalance in Section 4, I may have exaggerated their severity." Despite everything, Marcus found himself grinning. "You were making excuses to see me, just as you were volunteering for every assignment in the xenobotanical sections." Zephyra's eyes sparkled with amusement. "We've both been rather transparent in hindsight. So what do we do now?" Marcus asked, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her lower back. "Now?" Zephyra glanced down at herself, still wearing his oversized jacket over her enhanced figure. "Now we should probably return to solving my immediate problem. As wonderful as this is, I still have to face the station council in the morning, and I'd rather not do it looking like this." "Right, the accelerator." Marcus reluctantly stepped back, though he kept hold of her hand. "Back to the lab?" "Actually," Zephyra said thoughtfully, "I have an idea. My quarters have a private greenhouse attachment, a small one, but it has some experimental Valerian biotechnology that might help us understand the accelerator better." "Your quarters?" Marcus tried to keep his voice neutral. Zephyra's bioluminescence flickered with what might have been amusement. "Yes, my quarters, where we will be working on reversing this effect. Anything else that might happen would be entirely separate from our professional collaboration." "Of course," Marcus agreed, unable to suppress his smile. "Strictly professional." "Strictly," Zephyra confirmed, but her eyes told a different story. they made their way through the quiet station to the residential wing. Zephyra's quarters were larger than Marcus's, befitting her position as the chief xenobotanist. The main living space was filled with plants hanging vines, potted specimens, even a small tree that grew through an opening in the ceiling into the private greenhouse above. "It's beautiful," Marcus said, looking around in wonder. Every surface seemed alive with greenery, creating a space that felt more like a forest grove than a room on a space station. "Thank you. I've spent months cultivating this collection." Zephyra led him up a curved staircase into the greenhouse proper, a dome-shaped room with transparent walls showing the stars beyond. More plants filled the space, many of them varieties Marcus had never seen before. In the center stood a small pool of water that glowed faintly with its own light. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to the pool. "Valerian memory water," Zephyra explained. "It's a biotechnological medium that records and stores biological information. If the accelerator is based on similar principles, which it should be, given Valerian design philosophy, we might be able to use this to understand what changes it made to my cellular structure." Marcus knelt beside the pool, fascinated. "How does it work?" "I would need to immerse myself in it. The water reads biological signatures and displays them holographically." Zephyra hesitated. "Which means I'd need to remove my clothing." The air between them suddenly felt charged with electricity. Marcus cleared his throat. "I can wait downstairs if you'd prefer privacy." "No," Zephyra said quickly. Then more softly, "Stay, please." She began unfastening his jacket, her fingers steady despite the blush returning to her cheeks. Marcus watched, his mouth suddenly dry, as she set the jacket carefully aside. Her uniform followed, and though Marcus tried to be respectful about where he looked, it was impossible not to notice the dramatic changes the accelerator had caused. Zephyra stood before him in simple undergarments, her silver skin shimmering with soft bioluminescence. The patterns across her body were more intricate than he'd realized, flowing like living art from her face down her neck, across her shoulders and torso, following pathways that seemed to map directly to her cardiovascular system. "You're staring," she said, but there was no reproach in her voice. "You're gorgeous," Marcus replied honestly. "Accelerator mishap aside, you're the most beautiful person I've ever seen." Zephyra's glow intensified, and she smiled a genuine, warm smile that made Marcus's heart skip. Valerians typically find such direct compliments forward, but from you, I find I quite enjoy them. She stepped into the pool, the glowing water rising to her waist. As soon as she was fully immersed, the water's luminescence increased dramatically. Holographic images began forming above the surface complex three-dimensional models of cellular structures. DNA helixes and biological systems Marcus couldn't begin to identify. "Incredible," he breathed, moving closer to examine the displays. "Can you see this pattern here?" Zephyra pointed to a particular formation. "That's my baseline cellular structure. And this," she gestured to another cluster of light, "is the current state after the accelerator's effect." Marcus studied both patterns carefully. The difference is in the mammary tissue specifically. Everything else looks identical. Yes, but look at how the change was implemented. The accelerator didn't just enlarge existing tissue, it actually stimulated growth at the cellular level, as if my body had naturally developed this way. Which means we can't just reverse it like pushing an undo button, Marcus realized. We'd need to trigger a regression of that cellular growth. Exactly. Zephyra manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on specific cellular structures. But Valerian cells don't naturally regress once growth is complete. We'd need to introduce a counter-stimulus. Marcus paced around the pool, thinking, what if we're approaching this wrong? What if instead of trying to reverse the growth, we work with Valerian biology's natural tendencies? What do you mean? You said Valerian technology is based on organic growth patterns and environmental responses. What if the accelerator is designed to respond to biological feedback? Maybe it needs a signal that the growth is complete and balanced. Zephyra's eyes widened. A completion signal. That's brilliant, Marcus. The accelerator might still be active, waiting for confirmation that its task is done. Can we send that signal? He asked. Possibly. But we'd need to interface with the device directly, and we'd need my complete biological profile to generate an authentic completion signal. She gestured to the holographic displays, which we now have. Marcus grinned. Then we might actually be able to fix this. We might, Zephyra agreed, her excitement matching his. Then her expression shifted, becoming more serious. But Marcus, even if we solve this tonight, ... What? This, she said, gesturing between them. Us. This doesn't end when the crisis is resolved, does it? Marcus moved to the edge of the pool, looking down at her. The starlight from the dome above mixed with her bioluminescence, making her seem almost ethereal. Not unless you want it to. I don't, Zephyra said firmly. I want to explore this connection, properly. Not just because of heightened emotions from an emergency, but because I genuinely care about you. I care about you too, Marcus replied. Have for months. This whole situation just forced us to finally be honest about it. Zephyra reached up, water droplets running down her glowing arm, and took his hand. Then let's make a promise. We fix this problem tonight, and tomorrow we start properly. Dinner, as you suggested. Getting to know each other without the pressure of an impending council meeting. Deal, Marcus agreed, squeezing her hand gently. Though, I feel like I already know you pretty well. 6 months of stolen glances and convenient coincidences taught me a lot, such as, you hum when you're concentrating. You take your tea with 3 drops of that Valerian sweetener you think no one notices. You stay late every Thursday because that's when the communication lag with your family on Villar Prime is shortest. And you have a small scar on your left wrist from a gardening accident when you were young that you're self-conscious about. Zephyra stared at him, her bioluminescence pulsing brightly. You noticed all that? I notice everything about you, Marcus said softly. Just like you noticed everything about me. She pulled him closer until he was kneeling at the pool's edge, their faces inches apart. Kiss me again. He did, leaning down to meet her lips as she rose up from the water. The kiss was deeper this time, more confident, filled with all the emotion they'd been suppressing for months. Zephyra's wet hands came up to frame his face, and Marcus didn't care that he was getting soaked. All that mattered was this moment, this connection, this woman who glowed like captured starlight in his arms. When they parted, both were breathing hard. Zephyra's heartbeat was visible in the pulsing of her bioluminescence, and Marcus could feel his own heart beating in perfect synchronization. We should get back to work, Zephyra said, though she made no move to let go of him. We should, Marcus agreed, equally motionless. They stayed like that for another long moment, foreheads touching, hearts beating as one. Finally, Zephyra laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes. Come on, she said, reluctantly pulling away. Let's solve this problem so we can move on to better things. Better things sounds good, Marcus said, standing and offering her a towel from a nearby shelf dot as Zephyra dried off and redressed. Marcus transferred the holographic data from the memory water to a portable device. Together, they headed back toward the tropical wing where the accelerator waited, walking close enough that their shoulders brushed with every step. Marcus? Zephyra said as they navigated the quiet corridors. Yeah? Thank you. For making a disaster into something ... wonderful. He smiled, taking her hand in his. Thank you for giving me a reason to finally be brave enough to tell you how I feel. Even if it took accidentally enlarging my chest to make it happen? Even then, Marcus laughed. Though, for the record, I'd have been just as attracted to you without the accelerator's intervention. Good to know, Zephyra said warmly, her bioluminescence glowing softly in the dim corridor. Very good to know. They reached the tropical wing just as the station's chronometer chimed midnight. Outside the dome, Neptune's storms continued their eternal dance, beautiful and chaotic. Inside, surrounded by the quiet breathing of plants and the warmth of new possibilities, Marcus and Zephyra prepared to face whatever came next together. The accelerator still needed fixing. The station council still needed to be faced. But none of that seemed quite as daunting now. Not with Zephyra's hand in his, and the promise of tomorrow stretching before them like an unexplored galaxy dot sometimes. Marcus thought, as they entered the lab, the best things in life came from the most unexpected accidents. He looked at Zephyra, glowing softly in the darkness, and smiled. Yes, definitely the best kind of accident.